I've been spending a little bit of time just working on assembly code for writing to my video circuit here. And some simple things that I've just been working on. I'll pull this up so you can kind of see what I'm just playing with at the moment. I can now draw circles, and in this first upper left example, I've just got some circles within circles of different colors, and it probably doesn't come through on the capture real well, but it's a few circles within circles. And then I have a routine to draw a circle and fill it, and that's what you see with that circle just down to the right a little bit. And then I can draw a rectangle. I can draw a rectangle and fill it at the same time. I can draw a rectangle as a horizontal or vertical line also. And some of that stuff, is pretty simple. Drawing a rectangle isn't a big deal. Drawing a circle gets a little more involved, and now I'm working on drawing diagonal lines next, and that seems to have even more to it. In the last video, or a couple videos ago actually, I had shown some of my sample code where I was using basically memory addresses to pass parameters into these procedures. And some feedback was, well, try not to do that, and maybe instead use either registers, or as I looked into it, using the stack seemed like a pretty common way to do it. Definitely there's pros and cons to all of those, I'm sure, and that was some of the additional feedback I got is, maybe it really depends on the situation. But I've put a little effort into trying to make this easier. And I had a question from David on my YouTube channel. Maybe I could use macros to help with some of this, and that's what I've done. So I am using NASM as my assembler, and I'll just kind of show you what I've got going on here. I'm going to come back to this file that I'm including where I've started to do some macros, but let me just go down to this draw shapes, which is a procedure I'm calling. And in it, I'm doing things like I'm going to call this VGA draw circle. And in this case, it takes the parameters through these registers, DX, DI, BX, AX. And so I can just fill in, where do I want to draw the circle, the XY position, what's the radius, and then what color do I want to fill it with. And then if I want, I can jump down to what that fill circle looks like. And for now, this one I'm doing in this style where I'm just mentioning the parameters and I'm using registers, and as I get into this, then I use those registers to draw that circle. If I go back up, after I draw a circle, I have some more circles. So these were those nested circles that I was filling in. But then I had it, for example, here where I draw a rectangle and I fill it in. Now this one doesn't go through registers to pass the parameters. Instead, I'm pushing them onto the stack. So if I go look at that one for a second, when it comes into this, what I have to do is this type of code where I'm basically referencing on the stack a location, and then I use that throughout my code. And that worked, and my concern with this is it wasn't very readable. It got the parameters passed in, but to remember what is VP plus 8 or which one was my end Y or my color, and have to keep scrolling up to this little set of notes didn't seem like a very manageable way to do this. So I was already looking into macros when David had kind of asked that question. And so maybe here's an alternative. This was originally how I was calling this VGA draw rectangle. This is a non-filled version, but I would push on my start XY, my end XY, and my color onto the stack, and then I would call it. Well, I've now changed it so I can just simply say draw rectangle and feed it those 5 parameters. So I can say draw rectangle, basically starting at 500, 400, going to 600, 450, and fill it in with F0, F0 for the color. Now to support that, I had to go to this VGA draw rectangle procedure, and I put in some of these functionalities from the macro capabilities in NASM. And so now I'm coming in and right away I'm doing this percent push, and I'm setting the stack size to large, and then I can just set up my arguments. And I'm just specifying I want to have an argument that is a start X, a start Y, an end X, end Y, and color. And then whatever is going to call this just has to push them onto the stack in that reverse order. So color, then Y, end X, end Y start, X start, etc. But then the nice thing in my code is I can just reference them by those names. So that's really convenient. And then to maybe support calling it and passing things not in a reverse order like I had to do before, but passing it in an order that makes more sense to me, I made a little macro over here that's just called draw rectangle, and it takes 5 parameters, and then I take the first parameter I give it, and that I feed that onto the stack last. So the last parameter in the list I'm going to actually push onto the stack first and kind of back my way up, push all that stuff onto the stack, and then call that VGA draw rectangle. And so what the result of that is up here when I'm calling my draw rectangle, I'm going to send in the parameters just with commas separated list here in a way that really makes sense to me. So X start, Y start, X end, Y end, color. And for me that just seems like the natural order I want to do that. And then when I get into my actual code down here, I also specify that I want to use my arguments in that order, and then I just use them by name throughout my code. And so that is, in my opinion, phenomenally awesome. So that's going to make my life really easy as far as passing in these and using this simple macro to make it easier to call it, putting things in the order that it really more logically seems to fit, making the calls to it really easy, like this line here instead of all of these lines here. Pretty cool stuff in my opinion, and I'll start doing more with these macros. And I noticed there was some other macro stuff I can do for temporary variables or local variables within, for example, the procedure to VGA draw a rectangle, which those things will come in handy for me too. So I thought I would share that real quick, and what's on my screen, yeah, isn't super exciting. I'm drawing basic shapes, but just starting to build up functionality here little by little. So I've got my circle, filled rectangle, horizontal line, vertical line, text. So that's all working at this point, and hopefully I can get my diagonal lines of any degree angle here completed pretty soon. And then I started looking into polygons or triangles. Triangles then look to be a little bit trickier, and polygons even more work. I'll chip away at it and see if I can't build up some good functionality there. So just thought I would share some of those improvements I think I'm making. I like this macro approach, and so you're probably going to see more of that in my code as I move forward. And I will put this code as it sits right now up on my GitHub real quick if anybody wants to take a look at that. I do need to go into all these other procedures though and update them in a similar way as I did with this VGA draw rect. I have not done that with the filled version or the circles. Well, circle is I guess not using the stack, but like this filled version here, if I go look at it, I haven't switched this over to the macro approach, and you can see I'm still referencing this, base pointer offset, so BP plus 8 plus 6, whatever it might be. So you'll see that in my code, and hopefully I will have, I believe later this week, the PCB version of this circuit. So I will probably in the coming week try to populate that and see if I have any luck in the fire up of that. And if so, I'll post what the results are, if it gets rid of this noise on the screen or what other challenges I run into. And maybe one other side note, I am going to pull out how I'm doing the resistors. I think for the PCB, I'll initially put it in just to match what I had here, just so I have a fair comparison of breadboard to PCB. But then I'm probably going to pull them out and go with an R2R type of ladder. And I think I've got all the resistors I'm going to need for that coming here pretty soon, so I should be able to build that out. It's going to take more resistors than what I have here, but I think it'll be a more precise or digital to analog type of conversion. Good enough for now. Thanks for watching.